Thank you. So we are moving to Diana Rose, who is the head of ESG research in Seek AI and recognized thought leader in integrating technology with sustainability. With over 16 years of international experience, she specialized in ESG analysis, corporate responsibility, and the role of AI in shaping sustainable business strategies. Diana will walk us through key trends in ESG data, the challenges of regulation, and how innovations in AI, such as machine learning, LLMs, and Gen AI, are reshaping sustainable decision-making. We're excited to hear her insights. Anything to add, Julia?
I think this is all. Thank you for your beautiful introduction, but most importantly, thank you, Diana, for being with us, because your part is the part of interest for each member here, each participant. So we're really curious to dive deeper into AI today with you.
Definitely. Diana, the stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Gia, for this invitation to contribute to this great discussion. I'm very much enjoying everyone else's presentations as well, and hope that mine can contribute to this discussion. And thank you for the kind intro. So I'll start by just setting the scene, and then we'll focus on a couple of technologies and their use cases. So what do we mean by sustainable decision making? There's quite a few different stakeholders in the ecosystem of sustainable business and finance, as we know. Today, I'm trying to consider the perspective of investors who are making investment decisions, and also the companies who are collecting and preparing and providing information to them. What makes information decision useful depends a little bit on who's using it, but fundamentally, I think we can say that it needs to be as accurate as possible, robust, comparable, timely, and traceable and auditable. It's likely that it will be both qualitative and quantitative in its nature, and maybe include sort of backwards and forwards-looking aspects. So there are different approaches to sustainable decision making, as Audrey touched on. ESG is not the only framework. Of course, there's sustainability and responsible investment and impact investing. At the heart of everything, at the foundation, is a body of data. And I'm going to refer to that today as ESG data. And it's the foundation for this decision making. And it has a huge influence on the flow of capital towards sustainable outcomes that we're all working towards, or otherwise. In terms of the properties, if you just go back for 1 second, if we consider the qualities that we need for data to be decision useful, and then look at, on the other hand, the properties of ESG data currently, there's quite a big gap between the two. There is a vast volume of ESG data available, but the frustrations that we hear a lot is that it's too granular or too aggregated, with complex methodologies underlying how that process has happened, that it can be out of date by the time it reaches the market. It's patchy in terms of its coverage, uses a lot of proxies and modeled information, not always where appropriate, and it can be oversimplified or overly complex. Without a doubt, we know from experience with working with this information, it is scattered and unstructured a lot of the time, making consolidation, comparison, and analysis really challenging. So while technology and AI definitely can't fix all of these frustrations, there are some areas that it can help. And today I'm going to just focus on the areas I have most experience with in terms of NLP and generative AI. Next slide, please. Just taking a macro look at the trends for a moment. Three factors I'm going to touch on: the rate of change, ESG and responsible investment, and technology and AI are both extremely technical areas, and the pace of change has been quite extraordinary. In terms of ESG data, you can see on this chart that the volume of documents being published has grown a huge amount. We're looking at data for the FTSE 100 UK listed companies. And last year, they published 6 times more than they were publishing back in 2015. And all those colored bands are different report types. So the main ones are listed down the right-hand side. They're quite small to read, but there are about 70 types that we tag when we collect this information. This has been driven by demand from investors, the ESG ratings agencies also calling for lots and lots of different information, and consumers, incentivizing companies to showcase their sustainability efforts and to report. A key factor is also some of these voluntary reporting standards that we've already touched on today, gaining traction, CDP, GRI, SASB, etc. And this is where we get into the acronym soup. So I'll pause there on those ones. But this is creating a very, very large volume of information being available. In terms of regulation, this year, as we know in Europe, the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, CSRD, is coming into force for large listed companies and creating an even more daunting reporting burden for the companies. If we think this is a steep curve for ESG reporting, it's nothing compared to the explosion of the capabilities and availability to users of AI and technology, such as large language models in that time. I think that would be off the charts. We need a different scale. At the same time, just as another backdrop, there's huge uncertainty over regulation on AI globally. Amid an innovation arms race, I think we can call it, going on between the mega tech companies as well as disruptive players. Finally, in terms of trends, I mean, these two factors cause a lot of unstructured data. And I think that the question is, at the intersection of these two dynamics, how can technology be constructive in solving the problems around processing and making sense of this unstructured data so that humans can make decisions and good decisions based on it? Next slide, please. In terms of challenges, there's a lot of confusion and noise, and it's no wonder given what we've just seen on the previous slide, and there's sort of a sense of overwhelm. The purpose of the CSRD and also ISSB as standardized reporting frameworks is to help to make corporate sustainability disclosure comparable, digitally tagged. You touched on this, I think, Julia, to move out of PDF reports and to make it assurable and reliable, and to introduce some of the qualities that investors are calling for that will help to strengthen this data set to make it more decision useful. But this is quite a few years away in terms of really embedding and rolling out. And, it's not a global rollout yet. So we're still in quite a bit of confusion and noise. And that, combined with the incentives to report on sustainability, to set targets and to showcase good news, has obviously, again, we've touched on it today, created an environment that has enabled companies to conduct greenwashing and to make unsubstantiated or even misleading claims about environmental performance. Aside from greenwashing, there's also, social washing and all the other sort of factors that come under responsible business. There can be misleading claims made about them. Another big challenge in the Wild West of AI is how to implement it with proper governance, with an ethical approach and integrity. This is something we get asked about a lot. Some of the risks here, to name a few, are data security, user safety, vendor dependency, if you're thinking from a business perspective, and of course, bias and hallucination with some of the generative models, the environmental impact of data centers, compromising, a corporate ESG target, and the impact on the workforce. In a recent Financial Times survey, 52% of those surveyed saw loss of consumer trust as the biggest risk arising from the irresponsible use of AI, and 43% cited legal challenges. How that will play out, we'll have to see, but I think loss of control is a big perceived risk that we are sort of having to face as we think about how to implement technology for sustainability decision-making. Next, please. Moving towards solutions. So given the vast volumes of ESG data, making manual analysis almost impossible, ratings agencies, ESG ratings agencies, have filled this gap by taking the role of the aggregator and analyst and tidying up messy and unstructured data into tidier scores and ratings. And this helps investors to benchmark companies against each other. It's created a sense of relief and it's met a demand, but also a lot of frustration, as we touched on at the beginning, and a sort of dependency. However, that's changing. And at the end of last year, a survey of global asset owners showed a growing appetite for raw data rather than third-party sort of ESG ratings. However, that was in Europe only. So this is just a kind of hint of where we might be going. And what's interesting, and where we come back to technology solutions, I think to me that is an indicator that we're only now really able to have access to tools and solutions in the marketplace that can make sense of all that raw ESG data. So that's the reason that people are talking about these technologies for sustainability decision-making as game-changing and potentially highly disruptive to the market and how things have been done. So what are these technologies? So before I launch in, I'm going to try to offer a simplified explanation, just because I'm not a technologist by background. So I'm always trying to take a perspective of an outsider trying to understand the differences between them. So machine learning, we could say they're statistical algorithms that make predictions based on patterns in training data. Large language models could be really sort of roughly split into two. NLP models, natural language processing models, are also known as classifiers, and they're very effective at classifying text based on the bundle of words in a sentence. Really effective at filtering through large volumes of text. And then generative AI models create new content based on their training data. And specifically, in terms of language generative AI models, we've got ChatGPT, Claude, the ones that we're sort of household names now, and of course DeepSeek that just came out this year. While the first two, sort of machine learning and NLP to some degree, are quite well established in some larger investment funds for quantitative and qualitative analysis to seek alpha signals, there is still a huge spectrum of adoption in how, to the extent to which these are used. And now everyone is asking, can generative AI be a tool to help to make sense of large volumes of raw data? Is there a role for it that can it be used for sustainable decision making? So this is all dependent, first of all, on building something a little bit more boring and fundamental before you can use the latest clever thing, which is the data layer and the database infrastructure that sits beneath the models. You have to house your data centrally. And this is what we do a lot of at INSIG. We focus on bringing structure to unstructured data and preparing it for AI. We specialize in corporate reports, so transforming information out of PDF format into machine-readable text so that it can be used for analysis. And the intention is that you're starting to build the foundation for quality and trust and transparency, so that the human user at the end, who really needs this data to make decisions on, it has to be as accurate as possible and traceable, etc., so that you can trust that decision at the end and you can explain it to your auditor. So once that layer is prepared, NLP, the classifiers, and generative AI models can be used quite effectively to help humans to summarize, digest, synthesize, and analyze information to support their decision-making process. And I'll come back to this because I think what we're not talking about here is taking away any of the independence and the judgment of the human, but to use a toolkit to accelerate certain parts of that process that are currently sapping a lot of time and actually leading to shortcuts that aren't best practice necessarily, or the best that they can be. So it's about getting the human a little bit closer, and that I think will keep evolving. But it's not about delegating decision making to a technology. Collaborative innovation and market disruption, I just wanted to touch on, because I think it's quite an interesting space in that it's clear that collaboration between different domain experts and even sectors here is really needed to bring innovative solutions to market. Technology experts, subject matter experts, education is very important here too. Quite a nice example I wanted to share was a greenwashing tech sprint that ran over summer 2023. It was hosted on the UK's FCA, the Financial Regulators Digital Sandbox, and it was for the Global Financial Innovation Network, the GFIN. So that's an international network of financial regulators to support financial innovation. And they have this concept of cross-border testing. So it allows firms to concurrently trial and scale new technologies and share learnings. So it was a very, very nice environment. And this was the first ever greenwashing tech sprint. There were 15 global regulators, and it was over a number of weeks over the summer. The aim of the tech sprint was to develop a tool or solution that could help regulators or the market more effectively tackle and mitigate the risks of greenwashing in financial services. And we were a collaborator with the FCA, and we provided all of our data and some of our machine learning and NLP tools, as well as the corporate reporting data set. And we provided that to the regulators and the other participating firms, other technology companies, small and large, who were developing solutions. And we actually ended up partnering with one of those firms to develop a solution together. So it was quite a nice example of what can be done, but it does need coordination and some quite strong intention to bring people together. Finally, on this slide, pragmatism and hype. I think that there's a lot of different attitudes towards AI, quite hyped up optimism, as well as fear and skepticism. I do believe the use of AI has the potential to be transformational, and with implications that will have both positive and potentially negative impacts that need very, very careful thought and planning for. Somewhere between the extremes of hype and doom, there's a pragmatic approach. These are just applied statistical tools that are within our control to implement well, to implement responsibly and ethically, and to be very considerate about the quality of the decision maker, what they need from this information. One fundamental principle that keeps coming up, I'm sure you will have heard of this term, is the human in the loop. So the idea that human supervision must be present at every stage in the development and implementation of AI, and make sure that the models are functioning for human use. And in conclusion, next slide, please. Thank you, and delighted to discuss any of these topics further and answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Diana, for your user-friendly language and for discussing such complex topics in such a feasible way. I would like to pass over to Mikhail and actually to all the other attendees, including Joseph. Maybe you have some questions. I'm sure you do have a lot of questions for Diana, but just to respect the time, only a couple of questions for for her, and then we definitely can follow up and continue our discussion as part of the GM Network Challenge. So, Michael, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Diana, for this realistic and futuristic discussion. That was really inspiring. And I've just probably one question. We were speaking about importance of sustainable decision making and how the data plays a crucial role in this process. What about your thoughts on the key attributes that make ESG data truly valuable, and how can businesses ensure what they are using the right information for making an impact? For if
I think that's really the question at the heart of this debate, and it depends a little bit on the nature of the investor. I think with quite a lot of reported data tends to be backward looking, which is, reported emissions and performance metrics. And investors are also always looking for signals for the future and strategic direction. And I think what's quite interesting there is that the backward looking data is a little bit easier to quantify, and it might be quantitative and numerical information, whereas the forward looking stuff becomes a little bit less unreliable, of course, and a bit more narrative and unstructured. So it's a question of how to make sense of that. I think the source, the quality, the integrity of information, it sometimes can be hard to trace back to where data has come from. And this is a real risk. You would need to know whether a figure has been extrapolated from an industry and geographical, etc., sort of calculation, or whether it's self-reported. Now, of course, self-reported data can be unreliable too, but at least it's sort of traceable back to a company disclosure. So quite a lot of challenges there, I think, in terms of, and of course it depends on the lens of what you're looking to, make the change you're wishing to make with your investment, whether that's a pure sort of ESG risk approach or whether it's a more impact orientated approach. And I understand that the impact space it's hard to measure as well, these outcomes that we're looking for. But I think that AI, we have to think about how it can enhance transparency and accountability, and not just add another layer of obscuring information and adding complexity. That I think that's a very strong principle to start with when considering how to implement it.
Thank you, Diana.
Thank you very much, Diana. And I would like just to address to everyone. Are there any other questions for Diana? Joseph, maybe I can pass over to you with just one follow-up question. For Diana.
Yes, no, simplifying the data is great, but what about context? To what extent, even on the raw data, are you seeing clients have confusion on the context through which to understand that data when it comes to their different decision making, given such a wide variety of use cases?
So I'm gonna look at your question through the lens of like using a model to try to apply context to a query, because I think that's a really big challenge. These models are general purpose models. They're not necessarily specialists at all. And coming from as a user, what's so key is to invest time and thought into asking the right question using a generative AI model of a data set. Context is everything, context and intention. And on a like little technical note, a prompt can be 10 pages long. It's not going to be a one-liner. It's not like a chatbot asking for a simple answer. The layers of context are very key, and not something that comes naturally at the moment to the models that are on the open market. So definitely a challenge that I'm sure will start to be addressed in the next, who knows, I'd say year, but probably sooner, the rate of change that we're seeing.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Diana. And I think right now it is the perfect moment to move from data-driven strategies towards a bigger picture of sustainable business models. And here I'm delighted to introduce to you Lisa Knudsen. Lisa is the head of ESG at TrackBank and a highly experienced professional in risk management, sustainability strategy, and corporate governance. Lisa has played a pivotal role in embedding ESG framework within financial institutions, aligning business operations with sustainable development goals. And in fact, Lisa would probably touch the most important topic for everyone, how we can actually move from short-term gain towards longer-term strategies and both sustainable business models. So Lisa, over to you.